Hello people, welcome back to the CoachMain YouTube channel here. I'm back with another video and today we're looking at ZigZag Akesha. This is a deck that has been going around for a little while now and I talked about it in my previous video, you know, the one about control in Altered. If you haven't looked at that, check it out. And as I said in that video, I think control, hardcore control as it is typically understood, is quite impossible in Altered right now. But if you want to play Akesha, which is a sort of the archetypical control hero, you have another archetype that you can play that is very strong. It has nothing to do with control at all. It's a tempo deck and it's called ZigZag and it's really nice. So I wanted to showcase that, and there are two new changes for this video. First of all, I got a new microphone. You might have noticed the audio quality is a bit better, but there are other aspects that I had to change that make the audio quality worse. So maybe it cancels out, we'll see. Anyway, that's an upgrade. And number two is that starting from this video, potentially, we'll be playing not on Tabletop Simulator, but on BGA, Board Game Arena, which is something that many people have requested. Not only because Board Game Arena does all the scripting for you, so if you play a card, it will do all the effects on its own. So there's no potential for me to misplay anything or miss any triggers or any of that sort. And also because you can play with uniques, which is really nice. You can use all the cards in your collection on all TCG, and you can play against other people that use their uniques. So it's more interesting, it's closer to the real life gaming experience. There is a massive downside to BGA though, which is you have to own the cards. You can only play with the cards that you have in your digital collection, which even for someone like me who has most of the cards is a big problem. We'll talk about that later. In this video, the deck that I built for showcasing the ZigZag archetype has no uniques at all in it, because I simply don't own any that fit this archetype. Can't be helped, right? So that's that. In the future, I'm looking into maybe, you know, borrowing uniques from my friends for these kinds of videos. So we'll look into that. But for now, you know, it's the first BGA video, so yeah. About the deck, this is an Akesha list. As I said, it's a tempo deck. And what you're trying to do, this was popularized on Discord, as I said in the previous video, by someone called Niche. And they played it a whole lot. They did a detailed guide on it with all the matchups and, you know, what would be the sideboarding guide in other TCGs. And yeah, it's very nice, and it's about zigzagging. What does that mean? You try to always zig when your opponents zag. Basically, you try to trade, you know? When your opponent goes for one expedition, you go for the other. And your goal is to always trade evenly 1-for-1 in progressions every round. Which is obviously hard if you're going first, because you have to commit to something and then your opponent reacts to it. But if you're Akesha, you're never going first. So that's the idea. So you always go second because of the after you effect on your hero. You always try to trade expeditions by going the other way. You can typically trade pretty well. And then once the game has progressed so far that it's a match point, you know, both players only needing one expedition to win, at that point you try to steal the game by playing something like Small Step, Giant Leap, or winning the expeditions by playing a Beauty Sleep. So those two cards, Small Step, Giant Leap, and Beauty Sleep, those are our game winners, basically. And in order to use them, we need to get to a point where it's a match point by trading expeditions all the time. Which, you know, sounds typically pretty difficult on paper, because you're imagining if this goes wrong even just once, you're pretty much out of the game, because your deck is not built for winning 2 expeditions in a round. So let's say you're playing against a Kojo deck, right? It's on the play in round 1 and you lose both sides because, you know, well, it's Bravos aggro. How are you getting back into the game? That's the big weakness of this deck. You know, the deck has to have weaknesses. But generally, over all the matchups, you're having a nice time. So I really like playing around with this archetype. The deck list that I played with, that you'll see in the games, is not final. It's a start, but yeah, I really like how it plays. As usual, you can find the deck list in the wrap-up section at the end of the video, and as a link in the description. We'll talk about it in more detail in the wrap-up section. But for now, I just want to showcase you the games. I got 3 games against 3 different opponents, and without further ado, let's get into it. Okay, so in the first game here, our opponent is Teija. As you can see, I have to apologize. I recorded these BGA footages in the wrong resolution, so it's all a bit pixelated. That will be different in future videos. A bit of a, you know, growing pains. But yeah, the Teija matchup It is interesting because, you know, it's always the question of do they play Hydrocana, do they not? And we'll see about that. I'm really liking the starting hand. Baba Yaga on turn 1 is something that I really like. And the Kadiguran Alchemist is also a card that trades really well in the first round. You know, it's a 3-drop that has 3/3/3 stats, so it trades well. Tooth Fairy obviously not that strong, but it's strong in the second round since we'll be the starting player in the second round. So I'm keeping that too. And overall, this is looking like a hand that really, you know, it will make it easy for us to contest over the first couple of rounds. So I'm not really seeing many problems coming our way here. One thing that I noticed with BGA, obviously there's a couple of interface changes compared to Tabletop Simulator that are really nice to have, you know, like the numbers on both sides of the screen that show the strength in the expeditions. That's really nice. Everything being calculated automatically is very nice. It's a bit finicky, the whole thing, but you get used to it, right? So here we are. Our opponent took a bit of time there. The Teija matchup in general, you know, typically it's strong for a control Izmir deck, but we're not control, right? So we don't have this removal heavy playstyle that is good against anchored creatures. So these anchored, you know, Spindle Harvester maybe not so much because it's so weak, but Dracana, for example, is one that, or Coniferal Crone Man, if that sticks around a couple of times, anchored Daughter of Yggdrasil, that can be a problem. Here in the first round, typically with this ZigZag playstyle, you would go for playing the Baba Yaga to the Hero Expedition on the left to just make sure to be trading. But I decided to take the risk here to try and contest. Our opponent, they did have the second character, so in the end it's a 1-for-1 trade. That's, you know, unfortunate, but it's not the worst case scenario. Worst case would have been they actually go over the head of our Baba Yaga here and we're immediately behind. So that's why you wouldn't typically be so confrontative in the first round. But the way it worked out here, it's a 1-for-1 and yeah, that's just fine. You know, that's our game plan. So in the second round, pretty weak draws. Now we have 2 Tooth Fairies. Probably a mistake to keep both here because there's nothing in the opponent's reserve. So yeah, whatever. Sneasel going to a 2/2/2 on the hero side, but that's still contestable, right? So we go first, we use the After You, and again we're in the same position basically as the first round. We just see what they do and then we react to it. That's a unique Coniferal Cone Man there, by the way. That's another downside of BGA. When I hover over it, it shows me the preview of the card so I can read it, but whenever the opponent does anything, the preview disappears and I have to hover over it again. So that's why it disappeared there. Pretty annoying, but that's a 4/3/4, no additional text in this specific circumstance. So not the strongest or most terrifying unique there. And now we got a choice. Obviously it looks better to contest the hero side here. We can go over that Sneasel pretty easily, even with just the Baba Yaga from reserve. So I decided to play that. We could have gone with one of the other, 2-mana, 1-mana plays before that, but since the Baba Yaga is already in reserve, it's open information. We're not winning anything by dragging it out like that. And our opponent just passes, obviously, so that's another even round. The Coniferal Cone Man staying in play, though, that's a considerable amount of power already on the board. So this upcoming round is one where the Teija opponent might be able to be strong in both sides and give us a bit of trouble here. I'm really liking Magical Training in this deck. We're only playing the common version. I like the rare one more, really, because, the common version is 1 and 3 from reserve as a mana cost. So you're really just playing it from hand, and then you'll never play it from reserve because it's so expensive. The rare one is 1/2, so paying 2 for a card draw from reserve is, it's feasible. But we're playing the common one. Still, it's very strong. It's basically, a 1-mana After You that doesn't even lose your card in hand. So it's very good in this deck because you're always trying to sort of get into a position where the opponent does everything they can in the round and then you start playing, you know, and you have the complete information. That's what you're trying to get to. Obviously, with just one after you effect every second round from your hero, you can't always get there. So you need these very small characters or very cheap spells to sort of make that happen, play out the game very long. And that's also the reason why I think the matchup against someone like Sigismar or Fen should be pretty difficult, because they should be able to succeed, you know, in contesting you that way, in playing the longer game, dragging out each round even more than you are, and then outplay you that way. But here against the Teija opponent, you know, if they play a 4-mana Cone Man or a 3-mana Daughter of Yggdrasil, that's most of their mana gone, and we're pretty easily able to play around that, typically. So in this situation right now, we're tentatively contesting the Hero Expedition, not really showing what we have yet. But with our play of Kadigiran Alchemist, which is a 3/3/3, we can go up to 4/4/4 and then win that side. So the second round or third round is again, you know, going to plan. We'll trade evenly and it'll be 3-3 in score. So overall, we're performing, you know, we're not excelling, but we're doing what we want. We're always getting the even trade, and so far it's looking really nice. We're getting Off You Go on Banishing Gate here. Banishing Gate is a bit, well, you know, you would think it's good against like the Spindle or Hydrocana, but when do you ever have 4 mana to spare? You know, never, realistically. Against Hydrocana, yes. So that's the reason why I think in this position I decided to keep it, because I was thinking about, you know, well, if Hydrocana comes down, that's going to be a real problem. But then what do you throw away here, right? So maybe the Off You Go. I don't know. Off You Go is strong against anchored characters, right? So Off You Go is definitely a good pick in this matchup. So in the end, I decided to take the Off You Go and get the Banishing Gate out of here. The opponent is still on just 5 mana, going to 6 now, I think. So Hydrocana is not coming out this round. That's why I opted against the Banishing Gate. You could keep it too and maybe get rid of the Magical Training or something like that. Or even get rid of nothing, you know. Since your characters and your spells are all so cheap, you typically get away with having like 6 mana for the round, even if it's the late game. So putting nothing into the mana is an option as well. So we get rid of the opponent's unique here, and they respond with a Daughter of Yggdrasil, drawing both players a card. That's an Ellis for us. Ellis has really been impressing me. I'm running the rare version of the card, which has better stats, and it's really nice. You know, like it's kind of like Baba Yaga, where the card itself is good, and then if you play the rare, it's not anything spectacular, but the stats are better. And that really makes a sort of a subtle difference that you'll notice in games. It's just, it puts more power on the board, it lets you contest easier. And in a deck like this, where we really need to win 1 expedition per round, that really comes in handy. So I'm liking the upgrade. You could make the same argument for Kadigiran Alchemist. You know, if you upgrade that to rare, it's 4/4/4 for 3 from a hand. So it's kind of the same deal, but I didn't have any upgrade slots left. If Board Game Arena would allow me to play an additional playset of rares instead of 3 uniques, if I don't run any uniques, which I think would be reasonable, then I would have upgraded the Alchemist probably. But here as it stands, it's another round of an even 1-for-1 trade. We managed to get rid of the Daughter of Yggdrasil, and overall, you know, still going according to plan. We need 3 more points. Opponent is the same. And we're drawing another Off You Go here. So it's looking nice. The Studious Disciple is obviously very weak, you know, that late into the game. But even then, even if it doesn't provide any stats, it's still a 1 mana play, you know, that you can use as a sort of after you effect to drag out the round. But yeah, I've noticed that in the games that I played with this version of the deck, the Studious Disciple goes into the mana more often than not. Mostly. Because, you know, if it's round 6 or 7 and you draw 1, you're not going to play that. You have other stuff to do. So opponent plays Bountiful Meadow, which means that it looks like this is the Hydrocana version of Teija after all. They apparently didn't get the Bountiful Meadow first, or a mana channeling, or any of the ramp spells. But there it is. So Hydrocana maybe, you know, coming down next round or something like that. For now, it's just a Dracana, 1/3/3, which we should not have any trouble contesting. But again, that's not the point of the deck. The point of the deck is to zig when your opponent zag. So I decide to drag the round out here with just drawing from Magical Training, and I'm looking towards a Hero Expedition to maybe, you know, get this to be an even trade. But as expected, our opponent goes for Daughter of Yggdrasil here from the reserve, which pretty strongly contests the Hero Expedition. So in that case, we just swing the other way, right? And we take the companion side with this second Kadigiran Alchemist. Again, making it, you know, a 2-for-2. Sorry, 1-for-1. And we even have the Off You Go left available. So in this case, it's even better. We can get rid of this Daughter of Yggdrasil and make it a 1-for-0. And obviously that's pretty rare in this kind of deck. Typically you're hard pressed with all your resources to just win one side because your opponent is doing the same, right? But in some cases, you have this additional removal spell, you know, and then you pew and win one side while the opponent wins nothing. And that's obviously very strong for us. So now we're 1 point ahead. We can basically continue playing the same playstyle, the same strategy, just trade expeditions. It's even stronger now. But worst comes to worst, we can also give up one expedition, you know, at some point and not lose the game outright. We don't have the Small Step Giant Leap yet. I'm looking to draw that before the final round so that we can just end the game immediately once it's at match point. And both players now at 8 mana. So this is the end game for the Muna deck. So if this is a Muna deck that does have, yeah, there it is, right? 7 mana Hydrocana here, and even 2 mana to spare afterwards because of the Bountiful Meadow. So yeah, that is a strong dragon, not gonna lie. We decide to counter with the Lyra Skald. That's another card that I've really grown to like. When I was playing altered sealed events or drafts, you know, limited, at the start of the season, I drew a lot of these Lyra Skalds, you know, rare Lyra Skalds. I have like 6 of them. And they really underperformed in draft. So I didn't really like the card. But in this deck, I've really grown to like it. Because, you know, you have these cards that you just play because you want to drag the game out, like Magical Training or Off You Go, which is very expensive from reserve. And Lyra Skald allows you to cycle these in your reserve, right? You get rid of it, you get something else in reserve. And, you know, even if it's one of the fleeting spells, like Small Step Giant Leap or Beauty Sleep, that's a real upgrade. So that's good. And, well, the only weak point of that card, and I think this is the weak point of most of the Lyra cards, is that the stats are so uneven. You know, 3-0-2 is difficult to play around sometimes. But as it stands, as you can see, our opponent did not have any plays, and that's just the game. We ended up taking it over the course of this Hydrocana coming down by just going over the top of it. So yeah, that's it. The Hydrocana being a 5/5 did not help there, and it did come out a bit too late. You want the Hydrocana to come down earlier. So yeah, we did have enough power to just push that out. We didn't even need the Small Step Giant Leap. So that's a nice win. Bit of a weak showing from our opponent's deck, I think. Could have gone a lot better for them. But then again, you know, it was a weak showing from our deck as well, in the sense that we didn't use any uniques. And they did, you know? So yeah, that's game 1. For game 2, we're looking at Sigismar as our opponent. So that's a really difficult matchup for Control Izmir, as we know, because of the constant 1/1/1 that's just really hard to deal with. And it's not much better for us here. Sigismar being, you know, being known very well by now to being able to just drag out the round, playing small stuff, really sort of, yeah, playing it slow, which is, it's becoming a very prevalent strategy. And the 1/1/1 he gets every round is very strong against us as well. So we'll see how it goes. There's a unique coming down right at the start of the game. It's a monolith legate, so if it doesn't progress, it will sabotage, but it also gains a boost and does something from reserve. Not relevant right now. It's just a 3/3/4 right now, and that's all their mana. So yeah, that's a unique, but we can just play Alice, go over the top of this 1/1/1 recruit, and secure the even trade for this first round. Looks pretty nice, and the legate doesn't even trigger here. So yeah, I'm not unhappy with this. In fact, I'm very happy. Imagine our Alice was unique in some way and it just drew a card or did something else cool. We get a magical training and a Katagiran Alchemist for the second round. Alchemist looking very nice in combination with training in specific, because we have 4 mana. We can start out with the magical training, see what they do, and then just slam down this 3/3/3 to win one of the sides that they didn't commit to. So overall, very nice, and we even have an additional after you in the Alice. Although I would like to keep the Alice in reserve and play it as a character if possible. But yeah, originally it's in the deck because of the after you on the reserve ability. But as I said in game 1, I've grown to really like the character as a sort of, just as a body that has good stats. So there's the 1/1/1 recruit again, and we're not the starting player in the second round, so no opening for us to sabotage this legate before it comes down, sadly. And the reserve ability gives 1 additional recruit. So now we're looking at both sides being pretty well contested. Pretty difficult position for us, especially since our opponent has 1 mana open. That's not much, but it's very likely that they have another play. So I decide to go with the thing that I was looking for, the magical training, to just, pass the round back and see what they do. Because the 3/3/3 Katagiran Alchemist can win either side, right? Against 2/2/2 or 2/2/3. So we just need to look at what side don't they contest. And yeah, seems like our opponent is a bit spooked by us, playing it slow. They pass in the end. So now, well, it's pretty easy pickings for us. We can just win whatever we like, basically. And I decided to win the Companion Expedition. There's not really, it doesn't really matter here, but if you pick the hero side, you move into the only water terrain, which could be a bit of a problem. So besides, if you and the opponent are both in the same terrain on one side, I find it a bit more, I find it a bit easier to trade evenly, right? Because they are looking for the same stats as you are. So if you win on those stats, it means they lose. They can't win with some other terrain and screw you up that way. And there's a Banishing Gate for us here in this next round. Interesting draw. Probably get rid of one of the Tooth Fairies, right? Because you have 2 and there's nothing in the opponent's reserve either. So Banishing Gate as a sort of little trump card here. Maybe we're looking for some sort of landmark to remove with that, Monolith or Ordis Carrier maybe. Or maybe Isitok, but I'm not sure that Sigismar even plays that. But yeah, there's the Monolith. And now we have an interesting choice. We can basically destroy that Monolith and take the companion side with Studious Disciple, right? Making it an even trade and destroying the Monolith. Or we can keep it in play and take both sides, which gives us a very big head start into this mid-game here. 2 progressions for nothing, and we would only need 3 afterward. So I was thinking here, and I think in the end I decided to leave the Monolith in play for 1 round, because I thought, I have the Banishing Gate in hand. I can always remove it next round if that's necessary. They get 1 or maybe 2 boosts out of it, but getting the double progression seems very valuable here, right? So that's what I ended up going for, winning both sides. And we'll see whether that's a good enough trade-off. We get into a very commanding position. And with our deck, it should be pretty easy, or at least straightforward, to keep trading expeditions until we close out the game, right? With us being in the lead for 2 points. But we'll see, you know, Monolith is a strong card, and they're the starting player, so they get the boost on the recruit, and then on the first thing that they play, at minimum. So that's 2 boosts, right? That's not bad. Having 2 off-you-goes here looks a bit clunky at first, but it's strong against Sigismar, I would say. There are not many characters in the Sigismar deck that dodge off-you-go, but we have to get rid of something, right? So I got rid of one of them, and they play the Ordis Baba Yaga, which is an interesting choice. Not sure if many Sigismars play that, because, you know, the card draw is strong, of course, but Ozma kind of fills the same role, right? And Baba Yaga is a rare, so I'm not sure. Maybe you want to invest the rares into something else. And again, you know, for us it's the choice of, do we remove Monolith or not? I decided to go for it here because I'm thinking I can go over this 2/2/2, or maybe we just let this round go and set up for a stronger next round. The way it's looking, you know, they've set up strong characters on both sides, and we're not exactly overflowing with cards. We have basically 1 off-you-go and a 1/1/1 fairy, which is, granted, it's good enough. So the Katakirna Alchemist for 1, yeah, and then use the Disciple on the off-you-go, right? With the discarding Disciple from the reserve, we can make the off-you-go cheaper, so it just costs 1, and that way we can win the companion side. That's the only out here, and if that wasn't possible, then we're looking pretty bad here. I think that would be at least 1 progression for them and none for us otherwise, or maybe 2 for them. But luckily, with the reserve ability from the Disciple here, we can cheat out that round. Which, you know, that's testimony to how strong Disciple is. Some people have argued for upgrading Studious Disciple, because it gets this reserve ability, right? When you play it from reserve, it makes the next spell cheaper. So it's basically the thing that it did as a reserve power, or support ability it's called, but when you play it. So that, you know, some people really like that, but personally I don't, and you're struggling with rare slots, like in every other deck. So yeah, Studious Disciple is one of the cards in Izmir that I would play at common, basically 100% of the time. So 2 Lyra Skulls here as our draw. Yeah, could be better, could be worse, I suppose. But cycling the off-you-go from reserve with one of the skulls sounds pretty good. So I'm looking forward to that. Problem is, now with the Ordis carry in play, our opponent gets 1 recruit on both sides, right? Every round. So that's making it progressively harder for us to win one side. I decided to go for the Sabotage here. It's not clear whether his game plan for the round really depends on this Baba Yaga or not, because it's, you know, there's still 4 cards in in hand. So they probably have other plays to make, but yeah. That's a unique Ordis Spy. Interesting. They have to get a card from the hand to reserve to Sabotage, and then it has other abilities. Whenever a non-token character joins your expeditions, they may pay 1 to resupply. Yeah, sounds pretty decent. But, you know, with Sigismar, you're creating tokens, right? So if that was token character or any character, that would be much stronger. Luckily, we have an After You effect here from our hero power, because it's obvious that our opponent still has plays to make, so I would like to see those. They play Ozma, again with 2 mana still up, so maybe they're still not done. At least the teamwork training can still come down. So if I play Lyra Skald, they just teamwork training it. But, you know, 2 Lyra Skulls in hand doesn't seem like a very strong hand to go into the second round with. So I was thinking I might actually play one of the Skulls into that to just get the teamwork training out of the opponent's reserve. You can argue against that too, because, you know, at the end of the round, 2 of the cards from our opponent's board are going into the reserve. So the reserve will be overloaded, right? But yeah, I decided to go for it. Skald will be teamwork traininged, probably. And as a result of that, they still have complete control over the hero side. And we can't contest that now. The only thing we can do is activate the reserve ability from Skald, but that's not helpful, of course. So they get a double progression. Yeah, well, that just happened. That's the double progression that we got earlier. So it's still even somehow, the game. We're still in it. And actually we're at a point where even if we just trade evenly once, you know, 1-for-1 progressions, if we just draw Small Step Giant Leap, we win. So it's looking actually pretty good for us here. But then again, you know, it's Sigismar with 8 mana. So, you know, the fact that he's drawn Osmas gives him a lot of cards to work with, and they might just overwhelm us, because we just need to, you know, we just need to commit to one side and then lose it very barely in order for our game plan to fall apart. So that can always happen. They do this, I think, from their unique again, putting 1 card to reserve to get rid of our Kadigaran Alchemist. Or what was that in reserve? I don't recall. One of our reserve cards. Who cares? We can just play Magical Training and get one of the cards from our deck as a replacement. And yeah, Alice, of course, that's good stats. We have 6 mana, so we could think about playing all the 3 cards from our hand. Leading with Magical Training is a good idea. Banishing Gate, obviously not a very strong draw here. Removing something's all fine and good, but we only have 1 mana left afterwards, so that's not helpful. And now our opponent is looking at 4/4/4 on the hero side and 2/3/2 on the companion side. These stats are piling up and they're not even done. They have another teamwork training to remove basically whatever we do. It's looking pretty bad. If they score a double progression here, the game's just over. And we don't have, you know, we don't exactly have the stats or just the manpower to contest these sides. Drawing the Banishing Gate is not optimal here. If the Banishing Gate had been maybe a Beauty Sleep, you know, 1 mana, take something out, that would have been really strong. Beauty Sleep on the Order Spy maybe, and then win the the hero side. That's looking like a very strong play, but the Banishing Gate doesn't help here. So yeah, our options are very limited. We have to expect the teamwork training on the next character we play. So maybe, you know, playing out the Lyra Skald and then having it be teamwork traininged to get Alice into play sounds like a pretty decent idea. That's what I tried to sort of set up. I'm expecting the teamwork training on this Lyra Skald. The Hathor in reserve doesn't really help us because, yeah, well, I mean, it has 3 in mountain, so it's looking pretty good on the companion side to at least tie it, because our opponent is just looking for mountain there, but then we don't progress either, right? So here's the teamwork training on Lyra Skald, and now we have Alice still available for the companion side, which looks pretty good. I was thinking about the Hathor here, but in the end I used the reserve ability, which brings a character back to hand, or just any card from reserve. Not really relevant for the game state right now, but picking up the Tooth Fairy for the next round, you know, sounded like a decent idea. Because our reserve would be overloaded, right? Hathor plus Lyra Skald plus Alice, so I decided to do that before. And now we're looking good on the companion side, but yeah, there's the 1/2/2 the Orders Trooper in rare, and that just, yeah, that wins the game for them, sadly. I needed them to not have that play, so they progress in Mountain there, and that's the game. So it was kind of close. We decided not to remove the monolith, and I think that was a good idea. It seemed to work out. It was just this last round where they, it just had that one thing to overpower us. Yeah, fair play to them, right? They were using uniques, I wasn't. Something like that. Let's go to game 3. For the third game, we're up against Akesha. It's a mirror match, Akesha versus Akesha. And I picked this game out as the third game because I think it shows how well built or structurally solid the idea of our deck is, or of this archetype. Our opponent is playing sort of a more traditional Akesha playstyle, a bit of control, a bit of Izmiri playing, and we're doing this streamlined ZigZag archetype. So that's an interesting thing to see, compare these side to side. And I think it went, spoiler alert, it went really well for us. In our opening hand, you see I removed the Isitok there. Isitok is a one-off in this deck. I'm sort of liking it. It's just powerful, but obviously it's not powerful on turn 1. So our opponent goes with After You, and we counter After You with the magical training. We still have Tooth Fairy as a 2-mana play for round 1. So against this Baba Yaga, rare Baba Yaga, we can Tooth Fairy. Obviously, we lose the Sabotage. And if you look at it, this way we trade, but it would have been much better, I think, to play the Off You Go here. Just send the Baba Yaga to reserve and have no player progress this round, because we could have used the Tooth Fairy on the second round, since we're the starting player, to sabotage Baba Yaga, right? We lose that ability now. So it's a trade now. We both progress 1, and Baba Yaga goes to reserve with us not having the Tooth Fairy. So that's a bit of a misplay here. I was so focused on, I have to zigzag, right? So I didn't see that. We draw 2 Beauty Sleeps. I mean, sounds pretty sick, but obviously 1 is basically enough, more than enough actually at this point of the game. And it's interesting, if you play Akesha versus Akesha, it's like nobody has the After You, right? Because every player starts the round with After You, so it's kind of, you're the starting player in the opposite rounds, the ones that you were not supposed to be the starting player in, but nothing really changes. So these magical trainings are actually very strong in these mirror matches, because they're basically, your backup After You. And since our opponent has one here, we're forced to use the Tooth Fairy and sort of lead the character trade-off in this round here. So as you can see, our opponent goes for, not the ZigZag archetype. They're trying to contest our Tooth Fairy, and that's just a really bad idea here. Because of our Off You Go, we're able to send that back straight to reserve or to the discard pile here and win the round. So that's this plan of theirs to contest us completely backfired. Granted, it would have been the same outcome if they had gone to the Hero Expedition, right? Because I can still Off You Go. But basically, if that Off You Go had been a small character, that would have been it would have been much better to zigzag for them. So that's what we're trying to do, and they didn't here, and that puts us in the lead for 1 point. So Spycraft and Hathor, nice cards. I'm liking Spycraft generally as a card, but you would think that in this deck it's pretty strong because you have all these fleeting spells that you would like to resupply. But then again, you also have cards that are expensive from reserve, right? Off You Go and Beauty Sleep, most of all. Resupplying those is not really that strong. So the Spycraft resupply, it's not... Normally I think of it as a better version of Tooth Fairy, but in this deck they're more or less the same. Hathor, another interesting card. It's one of the sleepers of the first set, I think. It's definitely on my list of cards that I would never have expected to be competitively playable. I think it just looks so underwhelming, but it does find a very strong home in this archetype. I'm not sure what it's like in Lyra, but for the Izmir Hathor, it's strong here. Not spectacular, of course, but it is good enough to invest a rare slot. And that's saying something, right? There's so many other cards that you could upgrade. You know, Kadigir and Alchemist look strong to upgrade, Magical Training, even Spycraft. So, yeah. Right now, our opponent is set to progress there. This is another case of they're really trying to just, you know, contest us at every opportunity and counter our plays. But again, you know, we're just going over the top. If that Baba Yaga had been on the hero side, maybe that round goes a different way with the 2 mana they still have open. But now we'll just, you know, we're looking commanding, and their last play is a Spycraft, which doesn't change the board state. So, I mean, that's a nice celebration day there. I can appreciate the artwork with, you know, given how Kojo's getting the crown on that artwork. I'm biased, of course. But, you know, this is another round of, you know, they're contesting us and we just counter it completely. So, a bit of an example of not playing ZigZag. And it's, well, it's putting them behind by a lot in this game. Celebration Day is not online yet, given that it's 8 mana, so we don't have to worry about that. And we draw the Small Step Giant Leap here. That's looking very good. Obviously not yet, but it's good to have that in reserve for just, you know, immediately winning the game once you get to match point. So I decided to keep it here. You could make a point for discarding it, you know, keep the Sabotage. That's strong as well. Or what was that other card? You know, the one that I just discarded. It just goes into the one ear and out to the other. It's like immediately no recollection at all. Okay, Spycraft on the Baba Yaga, of course. Celebration Day is not a problem right now. And we get a Lyra Scout. Strong reserve ability, making a card 1 cheaper. So with our 4 mana left, we can actually play Hathor and the Alice, right? By discounting Alice or Hathor for that matter. So they just cost 4 in total. And that's looking pretty strong. So depending on what they do, you know, our next answer is probably going to be after you, but there is an argument to be made to actually play out the reserve immediately to counteract Sabotage effects. But I'm figuring that if they have Sabotage, they're going to play it here. So it's not like we get a chance to react to it in time. Let's see what they do here. We haven't seen these insane bangers from that Akesha deck over there yet. You know, like some sort of incredible... I mean, yeah, that's a unique, but it's not exactly a banger. That's some sort of Izmir Muna caregiver. Just a 0/1/0. I was hovering over it in the game, but it's not showing in the replay. Ah, there it is. You may pay 1 to resupply. I mean, drawing a card when it leaves the expedition zone is a nice bonus, but it doesn't contest the board, man. 0/1/0. If, you know, best case scenario, that nets them an expedition there from the starting square, but I don't know. Sadly, our Lyra Skald has 0 in Mountain, so that's not a good contest against this caregiver. But it is good as a reserve ability to make our Alice cheaper. You know, Alice being 3/3/4, that is very strong. And especially since our opponent only needs water, but Baba Yaga only gives 2 water, right? So Alice completely locks down that side, and with Hathor being 3 in Mountain, and incidentally 3 in Forest, that's 2 wins for us, man. Cards are just too good. Obviously, that's only possible because of the reserve ability of Lyra Skald, right? Discounting our cards there. I was talking about in the control video about how Lyra Skald is, in fact, the only card in Izmir that makes your cards cheaper. There is no ramp, and there is no cost reduction at all, except for Lyra Skald. Which, well, the general consensus is that that really hurts Izmir, because ramp is, you know, it's an important part of control strategies. But that's just, you know, in the other way, it just makes Lyra Skald pretty good. Cost reduction is strong, very strong. You would need more than 1 cost reduction card to make a deck around it. You know, some sort of turbo Grand Endeavor deck would be really cool. You know, just slam Grand Endeavor on turn 2 or something like that and win the game like that. But just Lyra Scald is not enough. So there's Istitok. That is pretty scary. And in fact, that just completely shuts us down this round. Our Katagiran Alchemist, even though we can play it, it's just a 3/3/3, so it doesn't contest Istitok, and it's useless on the companion side. So, yeah, I mean, that's just a hard pass from us. And one expedition going the other way for our opponent here. I mean, yeah, not really. And this is what I was talking about, right? We have one copy of Istitok in our deck as well because of these kinds of situations. It's just, you know, given that we always go second, you would think that Istitok on a theoretical level is very strong because our opponent already has committed something. And if we end up playing some sort of, you know, magical training or another after you, right? They have committed all their stuff or most of their stuff. And we just slam this 4/4/4 that just completely shuts down the other side. It's very strong. So yeah, that's one point going the other way, but I mean, our opponent is so far behind at this point. We just need 2 points to win the game, and we're drawing a Beauty Sleep, which should very much help to secure at least one progression this round, and then just, you know, slam the small step giant leap next round, win the game. After you from us, the Muna Caregiver, unique Muna Caregiver, not looking very strong there. I think the reserve ability is to anchor something, right? Or something of that sort. But that's not really helping them here. One saving grace for them could be that we're in really bad terrains. Our hero expedition needs only water right now, and companion needs only mountain. But if they're planning to contest the companion side where we need mountain with 1 in mountain, that should be possible for us to go over, right? So I decided to slam one of the Katagiran Alchemists there. Probably a bit better to start with the one from reserve for the hero side. You know, just delay committing to stuff a bit longer. But at this point, it's looking very likely that we'll win, right? We have so much stuff here. We have one other 1/1/1 and the Beauty Sleep. So they do Banishing Gate, 2 mana left, and yeah, well, I mean, it's still possible, but we just need to trade, right? We don't need to win the companion side. So we can just play the Katagiran Alchemist on the hero expedition here, and you know, that really forces them to have another removal spell. If they remove, that's fine for them, but they pass, I'm afraid that's just the game, right? We progress with this 1/1/1 on the hero side, and in the next round, we'll just small step it up, or we'll leap it up. I don't know. So yeah, looking back on it, it seems like our opponent was playing a pretty similar deck. The Muna Caregiver is probably one of those cards that you have the unique and you're playing an Izmir deck. You want to run it, even though it's really not good. They're thinking about how to salvage this, but I'm afraid it's over. Small Step Giant Leap is an interesting card. It's especially good in draft, right? Because this sort of trading, and the game slowly progresses, and then eventually it's match point. That happens a lot in draft, and there it really excels. But with a deck like this, we can make it happen in Constructed as well. You know, we just optimize our whole deck towards progressing the game evenly for both players, and then we just close it out at the end. Overall, very nice showing, and I'm positive about this deck. It feels, well, it's like night and day compared to the traditional control Izmir that I was trying before. Good showing. GG's. So those were the 3 games that I want to showcase. One thing that you really notice, especially, you know, for an account like me on Board Game Arena that is relatively new, it's not ranked, the opponents that you play against are typically not that strong. You know, you won't get spammed by Waru and Sigismar and Fen decks like you would at higher levels of the ranked ladder. And the games are technically, you know, not optimized, or, well, not optimized is a bad way to put it. It's just, worse players. There's no way else to put it. Players with decks that are just their cards that they own because they can't play cards that they don't have on BGA. Players that play uniques that are weak because they have them. Players that want to try weird archetypes. So that's a bit of a downgrade in that sense from the sort of staged matchups that I played on Tabletop Simulator, where I was thinking about, this could be a cool matchup, let's try that with cool decks, etc. And another upgrade for my videos, now that we're using BGA, is here's the deck list in the official altered GG format, which you're probably aware is absolutely awful. Like, what is this? Why is Baba Yaga there twice? What do all these numbers mean? What is all this? It's, I don't like this at all. You probably don't either, but here it is. So yeah, let's talk about this list. You saw most of it in the games. We have one of the Istitoks here. You could go more. I don't think that's really necessary. You could cut it too. And apart from that, there's not really many surprises, at least not many that we didn't see. Kraken's Wrath is one of the notable absences. If you watch the control video, I was talking about how I think Kraken's Wrath is very inefficient and bad at what it's supposed to do. That's one of the reasons why I'm not playing it here. And it's also not really fitting our playstyle, right? We want to pass it back to the opponent with small cards, with after you effects, and then commit to where they're not committing. So a big 5-mana board wipe just doesn't fit into this archetype, into this playstyle. Kraken's Wrath being 5 mana really means that for most of the time you're playing that, and that's basically your whole round. You're either just playing this and losing the game, or you're playing this and like a 1 mana character. So we're not into that. We're into putting power on the board. Katagiran Alchemist, very strong one. As I said, that's an easy upgrade if you have a rare slot to spare somehow. I opted for Baba Yaga and Ellis for the rare upgrades. Tooth Fairy is another one that could be upgraded. I know that Niche, the one Discord user who did the original Akesha ZigZag, he decided to upgrade Tooth Fairy, if I recall correctly. I don't think that's very, well, maybe it's worth it. But the character's power doesn't go up. It's still a 1/1/1. It just costs 1 from reserve, which is, it doesn't help you contest the board more, and it still loses against like a 1/2/1 or a 2/2/2. But it gives you, once you've played the Tooth Fairy and you've got the Sabotage and it goes into reserve, the card is mostly useless. So if it's rare, it gives you another 1 mana drop, right? To pass the turn back to your opponent, to do the zigzag thing, do the after you thing. So that's a strong upgrade in that sense. But the character is still weak. And for this version, I was opting for allocating the rare drops to make the character stronger. I didn't have enough to upgrade the Katagiran Alchemist as well, because Beauty Sleep is a rare, you can't go around that. Lyra Skald is a card that I really wanted to play, even though that's not in the original list. And that's an out-of-faction card as well, so you can't downgrade that. Generally, as far as Izmir goes, I think Studious Disciple and Tooth Fairy, those are characters that you can play at common, no problem. They're strong. Spycraft, Magical Training, off you go. These are all spells. They don't need the upgrade. Obviously, the upgrade is nice to have, but you don't have that luxury. And then another point, as I said, we're not playing with uniques here. I could see cutting the Lyra Skulls and upgrading something else in order to play 3 uniques. Or maybe you're just, you say, screw it, and you cut the Studious Disciples and just have no 1 mana play in the deck at all, besides from the 1 mana Katagiran Alchemist from reserve. That's fine as well. It really depends on the kinds of uniques that you have, right? If you have like a unique Alice, then obviously you have to cut one of the Alices because you can't play 4. And that's really bad, kind of, because Alice is good as a common and as a rare. So your unique should be something else, right? Ideally, you want your uniques to be a card that is not in the deck normally, so that you don't have to cut anything that's in the deck normally. Like a unique Thoth maybe, or Izmir Stargazer. But then again, if you have unique versions of those cards that are not in the archetype, chances are that the effect that they have is not really helping you. Like if you have a Thoth, for example, myself, I have the luck of having 2 unique Izmir Thoths. And they're nice in like Spellslinger, like, Fanis and Senka, but their effect, it's useless in this kind of tempo Akesha deck that we're doing here. You get a 1/1/1 if your expedition doesn't progress. that's something that you don't want to ever happen. And if it's some sort of, you put a card to your reserve to get a spell back to hand, or the next spell you cast, or something like that, chances are very high that it's not going to be effective for you. And you saw that in the games, right? We're playing a version without any uniques, and it did just fine, right? Because not playing any uniques gives you much more control over how to optimize what each card does and how they commit to your game plan. And once you get to that point where, yeah, I have this really cool Izmir unique that I really want to play, it's not that strong, it doesn't really fit this thing, but it's a real Kraken, it's 8 mana, it's sick, so I want to play it. That's obviously, that's going to be a downgrade to your deck, if you're being honest. So if you have any questions about this archetype, I recommend that you check out the Discord server, the official Alter Discord server, and read through this thread that Niche made about this archetype. It's really interesting, especially the section of matchups. He did like or she for that matter, I don't know the gender. She did a very big guide on how to play each matchup, which is very interesting. So yeah, that was it. Hope you enjoyed the games. Sorry again for the growth pains of this new format. The recording will definitely get a higher resolution in the next one, and yeah, it's a work in progress. But I hope you enjoyed it, and thanks for watching. You know what to do. Hit that like button, write a comment, a nice comment, hopefully, if you can. And tell me what you want to see next. I'm really rather stumped. There is one thing on my list. I was thinking about doing festival, like Lyra Festival or Muna Festival. That's another sort of combo archetype that I really would like to explore more. But if you have any other ideas, send them my way. Hopefully not, Waru or Sigismar or something like that. But there must be some sort of underexplored thing. Like I heard about Ganesha, maybe. Something like that, but I think I looked into that and it wasn't really feasible in my eyes. Anyway, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. Have a great day and bye.